So let's see what the news has in store for us this week. We'll ask our trusty co-pilot. So, from co-pilot, here's the top alternative media UK news stories from the past 7 days. The strongest themes emerging across independent outlets this week centre on Burnham-era political shifts, climate accountability, military lobbying and social care failures. So no surprises, no shocks. Let's have a look. The key headlines, concise takeaway. Right-wing media blamed for distorting climate crisis narratives. So we're back to that right-wing, left-wing, centrist. You know my views on that. We should stop looking at each other and start looking at the people that are pulling the strings. They're the problem. Lobbying push for UK nuclear expansion by ex-military figures and hard-right think tanks. Okay. Ireland's Israel-free jet sparks media backlash. Deeper analysis of boycott politics. Ireland's Israel-free jet. I wonder if I think we'll get. Yeah, we're going to get a detailed. He's just giving me the highlights at the top. Autism strategy campaigner pressures Andy Burnham for delivery. Byline Times exposes media monopolies and political proximity in UK journalism. And Byline Times also continues investigations into climate emergency impacts and political weaponisation of British identity. So let's have a detailed background. Here we go. Alternative media only. Climate distortion narratives. Independent climate reporters highlight how right-wing press outlets are deflecting responsibility for deadly wildfires, framing them as freak natural events rather than human-driven climate change. I don't think it is human-driven climate change. I think they are natural events. I know that there was some news coverage in a different country, and it's escaped my mind which country it was, that people were actually being arrested for deliberately setting wildfires. But this is the UK, and I'm not sure that's what's happening. People deliberately setting them. But human-driven climate change, no, I think they're more likely to be freak natural events. This coverage critiques the systemic media pattern of minimising climate accountability, a recurring theme across alternative outlets. Well, I'm a bit of an alternative outlet and I have minimised the climate accountability thing. If it was really a big problem, then when they go to their climate crisis meetings in far off countries, they wouldn't be flying in private jets, would they? Nuclear lobbying revelations. A former military general and a hard right think tank are actively lobbying for expanding UK nuclear capability, raising concerns about opaque influence networks and militarised policy agendas. So that's coming from the Canary. So alternative media frames this as part of a broader trend of defence sector actors shaping national strategy without public scrutiny. Well, I hadn't heard anything about this. I must admit I haven't dipped into social media very much this week. Having dipped my toe in quite a lot last week, I felt like I needed to take a bit of a break this week from it. So I haven't seen much, and I haven't really seen anything about this at all. And the fact that the public aren't being asked about it is probably not great either. Ireland's Israel-free jet controversy. Sounds interesting. Coverage examines how Ireland's decision to operate an Israel-free jet triggered backlash from mainstream commentators, while alternative outlets emphasise the ethical and political stakes of boycott actions. Well, the only way to get through to the people is through their pocket. So the people that are supporting the genocidal Israeli regime and the genocidal Israeli regime itself, the best way to deal with them is through boycott. It's to hit them in their pockets where it hurts, because they're financially motivated. I mean, I think their power is a big thing for them, but I feel that a lot of them think their power comes through money, because they can buy people off, they can buy our politicians, they can buy what they want. So therefore, they feel that makes them powerful. So if we hit them where their power lies, which is in their pocket, boycott, I think, is a good thing. So good on Ireland. Well done, Ireland. So alternative outlets emphasise the ethical and political stakes. Yeah, boycott. It's what we have left that we can do. We can vote with our penny. And when pennies add up, it comes to quite a lot. So if we just stop buying products and we stop utilising products, boycott. Autism strategy pressure on Burnham. Campaigners are demanding that Andy Burnham deliver on the promised autism strategy, highlighting gaps in social care provision and accountability. Okay, well, autism is it is a big issue in all countries now. It's not just the UK. The autism definition of autism is really quite shaky, but also I think it's not something that we haven't had as part of society in the past. I think it's something that hadn't been diagnosed and denoted with such importance in the past. So it's a framework that I'm not going to say it's used as an excuse, because I don't think it is. I think there are definitely deficits and problems and issues when it comes to the spectrum of autism, and it does need it deserves to be looked into, and it deserves to be deserves to have a strategy attached to it, just from a form of being able to diagnose and also to treat. And when it's a spectrum on a disease, there are various levels of treatment and various levels of being able to handle autism. So I think the prevalence of autism now is possibly needs to be researched a lot more, but could be down to a lot of changes that have happened, and we have a lot of medications now that are given to parents when they're pregnant, are given to children at a very early age. That needs to be scrutinised, that needs to be looked into. So I'm presuming when it comes to the autism strategy that it's encompassing not just the issue that is faced when you diagnose with autism, but how the possibility of autism can become so prevalent in the later years, or in like more recent times. I think that should be part of that strategy, and I'm hoping that it is. And if Andy Burnham responds to it, then we'll find out. We'll find out the whole area, but it is something that I would look into from a health and wellbeing point of view, because it's something that has become more prevalent, but I think has been part of our society for a long time. We didn't diagnose it. We didn't look at it as a specific disorder. Okay, media monopolies and political proximity. Byline Times continues its long-running investigation into UK media monopolies, documenting how concentrated ownership and pundit networks shape political narratives and weaken democratic oversight. Well, yeah, media monopolies, though I'm presuming Byline Times are talking about mainstream media monopolies, which we know they're all captured. We know they're all either funded by the billionaire oligarchs, or they're captured by the state that would have them give us crap, basically, and try and feed us crap that they expect us to believe. And they're not winning anymore because we have alternative media. So we have places like Byline Times, we have places like The Canary, we have places like Declassified UK, who are doing what I would argue is journalism, and the mainstream media are fictional, and they're not journalists at all as far as I'm concerned. Weaponisation of British identity. Byline Times reports on how Britain's past is being strategically weaponised in culture war politics, a tactic used to polarise public debate and distract from structural issues. Okay. I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe Claude will go into it a little bit deeper, or maybe Grok will. We had about British identity, I think it was last week or the week before, and I did say that the British identity is changing because we're not buying the claptrap that we're fed anymore from our government, and therefore our identity is changing, because our identity used to be that we would believe everything we were fed, and we don't anymore. Okay, climate emergency reporting. Alternative outlets continue to document frontline climate impacts, including extreme weather consequences and failures in government response frameworks. Okay, we had the weather last week, and I quite glibly said, well, we're in summer, so expect heat. And we've come out of flooding in January and February, where it rained nearly every single day. I think it did rain every single day in January, and February wasn't much better. So we've come out of that. So we've come out of flooding, and we're now into drought. It's the management. So when it comes to response frameworks, it's not just the response frameworks, it's what is in place before needing a response. Like, we need to have infrastructure in place so that it doesn't warrant having to have some form of quick response framework. Okay, that's it from Copilot. So I will have a look at the autism thing. Now we will ask Claude. So here's a roundup of the news for the past week according to Claude. Palestine Action barrister faces prosecution. A Palestine Action defendant sentenced as a terrorist last month says her barrister Rajiv Menon, KC, is now the first barrister in English legal history to face prosecution over remarks made in a closing speech to a jury, a move Open Democracy frames as a deliberate warning to lawyers against defending protesters. Now, I was aware when the Palestine Action cases were going on in court that one of the barristers had instructed the jury that they could vote according to their conscience when it came to the offences that had been committed. And that's true. That's part of our law. That's part of our judicial system. If you're on a jury, you can vote with your conscience over something that has occurred that you are the jury member presiding over. You can vote with your conscience. However, it's not common that it is voiced in the court. And the fact that it was voiced in the court over a Palestine Action defendant speaks volumes, that he's coming up to face prosecution over remarks he made in a closing speech. We'll follow it and we'll see, because our government are trying to do away with our jury process completely. And it's a fundamental part of our judicial system. And a lot of the barristers, a lot of the lawmakers, the people that are in that profession have stood against it and are not very happy about it. So we'll follow it and we'll see, because more will come out about that. GMC data breach exposes abuse victims file. Open Democracy reported that the General Medical Council accidentally sent a sexual abuse victim's confidential file, including intimate details, to another patient who had accused a doctor of sexual assault. Wow. That's a big data breach. That's the General Medical Council. What a big breach. A breach of confidence, obviously, a breach of data. That's terrible. That should never have happened, and I'm sure that there will be repercussions for that. Fossil fuel lobbying access under Labour. Novara Media reported that ministers met fossil fuel lobbyists roughly 500 times in Labour's first year in power, and separately covered a former minister, James Purnell, leading a firm representing arms, fossil fuel and water companies. We've had this a couple of times over the last few weeks. It keeps popping up. Novara Media they keep prodding it. They keep like they're poking it constantly with a big stick to see where it goes and what happens. But we have discussed the fact that the climate change agenda is a big money spinner. So this James Purnell will be spinning the money because it's a great way to get money. So that's what that's all about. It's all about greed. It's all about money and vaulting off of the climate, the problems with the fossil fuel, the climate change, all of that. It'll all be about making sure big wads of cash go into billionaires' pockets. Reform UK funding and data scrutiny. We've had this a couple of times. Byline Times published an investigation questioning whether Reform UK underdeclared the true source of some of its funding, and separately reported Reform's deputy leader had withdrawn earlier denials in a data privacy case after being accused of being cavalier with the truth. It's a politician. It's going to be cavalier with the truth. They wouldn't recognise the truth. And if they did recognise the truth, they'd go out of their way to hide it. So being cavalier with the truth, I think is a nice way of saying it. They're just not truthful. Billionaires and UK sanctions. Byline Times reported that a number of Britain-linked billionaires remain untouched despite the UK sanctions regime being billed as tough. Okay? Not sure what that's about. I'm not sure if they're talking about, it says Britain-linked billionaires remaining untouched. So possibly billionaires that are from the UK that live abroad, possibly. Or possibly billionaires that live abroad linking into British people. Not sure. Cambridge Palantir political pipeline story. Byline Times. August print edition leads with an investigation into Palantir co-founder Peter Thiel's political pipeline recruitment project, and it reported links to Cambridge alongside continued coverage of Burnham's challenge. Well, Burnham's challenge is to do away with Palantir altogether because the people do not want it. The National Health Service do not want it. We know that Palantir has got its terrible, awful fingers in lots of dirty pies, and we don't want a part of it. So Burnham has got a big decision to make on that. The political pipeline recruitment project links to Cambridge. Okay, so Palantir are, by the sounds of it, trying to get more fingers, dirty, sticky fingers, into our future politicians by linking it to Cambridge. Yeah, doesn't sound good, does it? Recruitment project. Burnham's early days as PM. Across outlets, continued scrutiny of Andy Burnham's start as PM. Open Democracy's Paul Rogers argues Labour is rising in the polls as reform stumbles, but says the real test will be Burnham's handling of the US, Israel and climate policy. Novara Media noted a new poll showing Labour has overtaken reform under his leadership. We covered this last week, and I did put it to you that possibly the reason Labour are looking good is because reform are going so badly at the moment. Reform are going down in the polls, which will immediately show when it comes to figures that Labour look better. Whereas obviously reform were polling high everywhere at one point until all the financial scandals came out and we all realised just how corrupt. We knew just how corrupt Nigel Farage was, but how corrupt his party is as well. Okay, US pressure on far left protest movements. There's that far left, far right again. Open Democracy covered reporting that the Trump administration convened around 70 countries to push a crackdown on far left terrorism, which Argentine human rights group CELS warns is really targeted at progressive protest movements, with UK sentencing of Palestine Action activists cited as an early domestic example. Well, the sanctions and the proscription of Palestine Action in this country came, I think, from pressure from abroad. We'll just leave that there. It's come from pressure from abroad, and I don't think it's just the US. Okay, the Canary's ongoing print expansion. The Canary continues rolling out its new daily left-wing tabloid, launched earlier this year with backing from a shareholder, positioning itself explicitly as an alternative to Murdoch and mainstream-owned papers on newsstands. I'm really happy that they're able to continue with that, because it was in its very infancy when Lloyd's of London decided to put a kibosh on Canary's finances and close their accounts, froze their accounts. I don't think they close them, I think they freeze them, so they just don't have access to their money. And a few weeks ago, when we were covering that story, we found out from the Canary that they'd had to put their actual new daily tabloid paper on a back burner, because it was an expensive thing to do anyway in the first instance, but also because their funds had been frozen, there wasn't any way they could put it out. So that would be an indication to me that either Lloyd's of London have unfrozen their funds, or that they have managed to garner enough support to get it pushed out anyway. But that's good. That's a good thing. Okay, so that's it from Claude. Now we'll do the same. We'll ask Grok the same question. Okay, so here are some of the more prominent UK news stories from roughly the past 7 days from Grok. Okay, drought and extreme weather. That's what Grok's going with the first. At top of the heap, half of England, plus the whole of Wales, was formally declared in drought by the Environment Agency on the 29th, after an exceptionally dry July. As little as 1 to 7% of expected rainfalls in parts of the south and the east, multiple heat waves and low river reservoir levels. This has been described as a flash drought. Impacts include early harvests, elevated wildfire risk, and hosepipe bans covering tens of millions of people. Coverage in alternative spaces has focused on preparedness failures, agricultural strain, and whether successive governments have treated repeated dry spells and heat as the new normal rather than anomalies. I mentioned this last week when we were talking about drought, and a couple of minutes ago when we were talking about the immense amount of rainfall we had in January, the immense amount of rainfall we had in February, and now we're into August and we're in drought. So from the end of July. So the 29th was when they covered it, and I did. So yeah, I covered last week on the 29th on the live on Twitch, when we did the news, that was the day that had been announced. So Grok has brought it up again. So yeah, it came out last Wednesday is the official announcement on the exceptionally dry July. And yes, I was very glib about the weather, like I said before, but I'm really pleased that they are highlighting the fact that there is a failure of preparedness for this, because that's how I left it last week. We as a nation should be prepared for our weather, and it's not so out of the question that in July and August they're dry months. They're dry months. That's not unusual. So why are we not prepared for that? Why has government not got something in place that makes us prepared for that? So wildfires have continued in places such as Rhondda Valley in Wales, and earlier incidents linked to dry conditions in Scotland's Cairngorms and English woodland. Some reports note deliberate starts. Well, that would be awful if it's true. And when they say deliberate starts, I'm not sure whether that's some person going out to deliberately start a fire, or whether that's some person going out to have a barbecue and not extinguishing that fire. Like, those are two different things. When they say deliberate starts, it could just mean that we deliberately had a barbecue. We weren't aware that we hadn't put it out. So this brings it back also to citizen awareness. So if you are going to go out and you are going to have a barbecue and you're going to have it outdoors, then, which obviously you're going to do in a barbecue and not in your garden. I mean, if you're going to go out into woodland, or if you're going to go out into open spaces, you need to be educated in your handling of that situation. I don't think deliberate start does actually mean somebody went out and wanted to commit arson. I'm sure that's not what it means. Politics under new Prime Minister Andy Burnham. Burnham, who took office in mid to late July after Starmer's resignation, remains the dominant political story. Unheard pieces have scrutinised specific early moves, including scepticism about his prisoner release reforms. Don't be fooled by Burnham's prisoner release reform, and warning that his vocational educational schemes risk dumbing down standards. Commentary has also examined devolution plans, No 10 North, cost of living measures, and whether Burnham bounce in polls will hold against Reform UK. I think the Burnham bounce will hold against Reform UK because Reform UK are plummeting. So Burnham doesn't have to bounce very high with plummeting Reform. So if that was Reform and that was Burnham, and Reform have done that, it would give you the illusion that Burnham's bouncing because Reform have done that. So I watch this space. Byline Times has run investigations into Reform UK funding and internal issues. This is coming up week on week on week. So good on Byline Times. They're pushing it. They're pushing it. They're pushing it. Crypto donators, private flight donations, connections involving figures linked to Nigel Farage, and questions around council level operations and Restore Britain. Separate pieces cover Green Party outreach to Burnham's Labour and challenges over the Palestine action ban. As a general populace, I think we're really all quite pissed off about the Palestine action ban. And our politicians are not listening to us. Palestinian protests are still going on. People are still shouting from the rooftops about the genocide that's happening in Palestine. Not just Gaza, because it's in the West Bank now as well. They're marching their way through Lebanon too. And we, as people who have hearts, don't want to see it. We don't want it to be occurring. It's outrageous, and we feel our government should stand up and say something against it, and none of them are. So it's left to the citizens to do that. And you can tell whose side the government is on, because as soon as the citizens stand up and say, we don't agree with that, they get arrested. They get arrested. All people with good conscience who cannot bear what's going on in that part of the country and have the fortitude and the cojones to stand up and say something about it, yeah, get arrested. And that's without actually being active. That's just walking, not saying anything, holding a placard, get arrested. So not going to buildings and spraying them and stopping movement to and fro from the building. None of that. Just standing and saying, I don't agree with genocide. Get you arrested. Makes you think none of our politicians have any conscience at all, doesn't it? Migration and channel crossings. This has been ongoing. Ongoing small boat activity featured prominently. Like last week, they said there wasn't small boats, it's big boats now. It's not just small boats, it's big boats too. including a recent incident in which more than 170 migrants were rescued after a boat caught fire in the Channel, with returns to France reported. Oh. GB News opinion and discussion pieces have highlighted the cumulative impact on seaside towns and framed crossings in stronger terms around invasion and destabilisation. Well, I'll be completely 100% honest with you. I don't give a shit what GB News have to say, because they are not alternative media. They are captured. So they are promoting a narrative that the people who are paying them want us to believe. They're captured. They're captured media, so you may as well just put them into the mainstream media kind of flow, because as far as I'm concerned, that's what they are. There's only one redeemable quality about GB News, and that would be Mr. Neil Oliver. And I'm not even sure if he's still on it, because I don't follow GB News anymore, because they are captured. I do follow Neil Oliver, though, and I highly suggest he's worth a watch if you're ever interested. Neil Oliver, find him on YouTube. Other notable items: Cambridge Academia, unheard coverage of scandal involving academic Jason Arday, framed as evidence that universities still operate with 2020 era assumptions. Not sure what that's about. I wonder if that's linked to the Palantir thing, because that was unheard as well. So, and it was Cambridge Academia. It might be. Conservative Party, an ex-neo-Nazi activist, Joshua Bonehill Payne, was selected as a candidate, then withdrew. Party leader Kemi Badenoch indicated he would advise on extremism instead. Okay. If he's an ex-neo-Nazi activist, then ex meaning that he's turned around from that and no, I'm not of that vein anymore, then arguably he could be the right person for that kind of role, to advise on extremism, because I would say being a neo-Nazi at some point is quite an extreme thing. So how to turn your head away from that and how to follow a different path is going to have the experience for that. Single-sex spaces guidance came into force covering public facilities in England, Wales and Scotland. Single-sex spaces. Are we talking toilets? This might be along the transgender line, possibly. Not sure. Crime stories, very small actually, on this week's News Hub. Crime stories: stabbings in central London, never great. Other serious offences continue to circulate alongside longer running justice system critiques. So yeah, it's nice that, you know, we haven't got a mass of crime stories. And stabbings in central London, I'm not saying that that's usual, but it has been reported quite a lot now that there are frequent stabbings in central London. And central London is just a hubbub of people, and they're people from all walks of life, all different countries, and there's a celebration of multiculturalism, I think, in London, and your ability as a native to London to be able to experience different cultures in one place. I think that's a fabulous thing. Personally, I think it's wonderful. It broadens your horizon to learn about other cultures and how they can add colour to our culture. But when it comes to stabbings and things like that, that's going to be right up there with clashing. So maybe culture clashing. But it could also equally be gang culture clashing as well when it comes to stabbings. So these reflect themes that alternative outlets have emphasised: drought, climate resilience, post-Starmer Labour direction under Burnham, reform funding and right-wing fractures, and migration pressures. Mainstream sources cover overlapping facts, but often with different framing and emphasis. So that's our news for the past 7 days. That's our news for this week. From a health and wellbeing point of view, I'm going to do a short dive, not a deep dive. I'll do a short dive into the autism thing that's coming up for Burnham, because it would be really interesting to see what kind of systems people are asking to have put in place, and whether the consultation that comes for those systems has come from people who haven't got experience of it but feel something should be done, or whether it's actually come through consultation of parents and carers who are looking after people with autism. So I'll do a short dive into it and we'll see. And if it's something that keeps popping up in the news, then I might do a deeper dive and I'll bring it to you on a research hub on a Wednesday on YouTube. But from me, that's it for now. Always remember, power to the people, and together we rise.